So we can go ahead. Hope everyone's had a great week. I had a real nice week last weekend. I was gone. I did get to watch the sermon and the class last week. I got caught up on this, so I know what y'all talked about last week. I know y'all were talking about giving with the widow's mites and appearance is what people try and do is they're more concerned about their appearances than what God wants us to do. And and I know Jesus at the end of when y'all were talking in John or studying in John 12 that Jesus said if you rejected him and his words, you were rejecting God. So I think that's where y'all finished up on last week. So that was where we were at. This week we're going to be in back in Matthew 24. Remember, Jesus has been talking to the people at the synagogue there when he's been speaking. We had gone through a couple of weeks ago. We went through all the woes that he had given the Pharisees and Sadducees and things that they were doing. And I think part of that was, y'all studied that last week also, that they were putting themselves in the best of places to look the best, to get the most praises from everyone. That's what was going on there. This week, he is continuing to talk to those people that are there. Even though the Pharisees and Sadducees are listening to this, he's talking to the people that are there. You have to remember that. I do want to start at the very end of chapter 24, toward the end of chapter 24, because there's a statement that's made here that the world seems to mess up on all the time. But we're going to go to verse 34 of Matthew, verse 34, chapter 24, verse 34. And pay attention as we're going through this part of the Scripture here, what he says here, and keep this in mind. It says, assuredly I say to you, this generation will by no means pass away till all these things take place. What does that mean? I mean, it's going to happen in their lifetime, right? These things that we're about to talk about is going to happen in Jesus' lifetime. When we get to about verse 29 in this chapter, that's whenever the world totally misunderstands what he is saying here. And we're going to get to that in a little bit. So let's remember, keep that in mind as we're going through. All these things are going to happen to this generation that he's talking to there that he's facing. All right. And he is talking about, we're going to go into the description about the destruction of the temple. And we know it happened. It's in 70 AD. But he's going to talk about some things here. If someone wants to start reading, again, my throat is a lot scratchier today than I thought it was going to be. So I need someone also to read for me. If they will start in verse 1 of chapter 24, and then we will stop in at the end of verse 3, please.
Then Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came up to show him the buildings of the temple. And Jesus said to them, do you not see all these things? Assuredly I say to you, not one stone shall be left here upon another that shall not be thrown down. Now as he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?
Y'all remember back in 23, Jesus was, I can picture Jesus in my mind, him sitting there and he bows his head, he's shaking his head like a lot of times. We're disappointed in people, right? That's usually what the position we take. We just kind of sit down, we just shake our head going, I cannot believe that you're thinking these things. And he does that at the end of chapter 23. He says, oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the one who killed the prophets and stoned them and who was sent to her. How often I wanted to gather you as a chick, I wanted to gather you together as a hen would gather her chicks under her wings, but you were not willing. See, your house, it is left to you desolate. For I say to you, you shall be by no means see me no more till I say to you, till you say, blessed he who comes in the name of the Lord. He's at the very end of it, and that's when he says what he says about the assembly there, that he was going to be torn down, and his disciples don't understand what he's saying, so they come to him. It's really important in this verse 3. 3 questions are asked here. The 3 questions are, when is the temple going to be torn down? What is the signs of your coming to tear down the temple? That's where people get misunderstood. They think it's the coming end of the age or end of time, the judgment day, and it's not talking about that. What is he talking about? What is the context? The context here, we're talking about the destruction of the temple, right? That's the whole context. Keep that in mind. He's continually telling them the temple is going to be torn down. The temple is going to be torn down. He's not talking about coming back at Judgment Day. Okay? Because he's already told them, what did we say toward the end of this chapter? All these things are going to happen in your lifetime. All right? So they ask you those three, that's 2 of the questions. The third one is, what are the signs of the end of the age? Now, the end of the age is the end of that particular time span. I like to think about it like the Civil War. That caused the end of an age in this country, didn't it? It should have caused the end of the northern influences on the South, the slavery issue that was going on in this country. That was the end of an age, of a particular time period. And that's what he's talking about here. He's talking about the end of the age here. And we're going to go on to look at some of these things. We're going to answer the first question. And he starts answering it right here. And it goes through about, let's see. It will go through several verses. But question 1 is, when will the temple be torn down? If someone wants to start in reading verse 4, and I'll stop you. But I'll tell you what, I'll go ahead and read it. I'll try. See if my voice will hold out or not. But verses 4 and 5, Jesus, this thing is wanting to cut out. Jesus answered and said to them, take heed that no one deceives you, for many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and will deceive many. That's the first sign. A lot of false teachers are going to be coming. Have they been coming before? We know that they have because he talks about that before. But it's going to increase. A lot more and more people are going to come and say, I am the Christ. Why would they do that? What would be the purpose of someone wanting to think that they're the Christ?
Well, make money off of it for one thing.
A lot of it was to make money. Now we know religion is a big money-making deal. Is it not? If you don't believe it, look at the planes and the temples and the churches and the riches of some of those people that in worship or in religion today. They're making lots and lots and lots of money. And that's around the world. That's just not here. That's everywhere around the world. Nothing new under the sun. It's the same that's been going on forever. All right? Plus, they wanted, remember what the Pharisees and Sadducees, what did they want? Now, what did they want for themselves? What we just studied. What was there? They wanted prestige and power. So that's what it is. It's about prestige and power and being seen. So someone, if they want to claim that they're the Christ, don't they get instant prestige and power? They do. That's one of the big reasons they did that. So in verse, that's the first sign that's going to come. There's going to be a whole lot claim that they are the Christ. And how do we know that they're not the Christ? What does the Bible tell us about how do we tell the difference if they're the Christ or not?
Well, when Christ comes back, the whole thing ends. We have the judgment. And on top of that, everybody will see him. Everybody will be able to see him. These people saying, I am the Christ, not everybody in the world is going to see them.
Right. Okay. Plus, what else? What are the other signs that prophecy told us we would recognize the Christ by?
He will render judgment.
If they teach any other gospel.
Okay. They're different. And a lot of times we've already found out how much did the Pharisees and Sadducees change the law. They taught something totally different or trying to teach something totally different. Plus, what were they asking for? Did Christ ever ask for anything from anybody? He didn't. All he asked was their obedience, right? Just believe my words. Believe what's going to happen. He didn't want money from them. He didn't want places to live. He didn't want the nicest chariots to ride around in. He didn't want anything from anybody. All right, that's a huge difference in what a false teacher or a false Christ would be.
Well, Sadducees, if they taught, would have been false teachers because they didn't believe in the resurrection, right?
Right. And if someone came saying those things, that there is no resurrection, what did they already know from Scripture already, from the old law? That there was going to be a resurrection, because it prophesied there was going to be a resurrection. All right? There are signs that they should have recognized that did not. All right? Verses 6 through 8. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not troubled, for all things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. All right? Do we still hear wars and rumors of wars today? Is that something that today's society try and say that, hey, this is the beginning of the end of times, when judgment is going to happen, when Christ is coming back? He says here, even then, before the fall of Jerusalem, you're going to hear of wars and rumors of wars. But he's talking about the fall of Jerusalem and not the end of time, or the end of, what's another word? I'll keep out the end of time. There is a time period here that he's talking about, the end of the world, when Christ comes back. He destroys, because we're also told what's going to happen to the earth, the very earth that we're standing on.
Burn up.
It's going to burn up. It's no longer even going to be here. So it can't be that time period that he's talking about. All right? In the next verses, something that's about to happen that we know that did happen. In verses 7, should have gone. For the nations will rise against nation. That's the wars and rumors of wars. The kings against kings. And there will be a famine, pestilence, and earthquakes in various places. And then here's these are the beginning of the sorrows. This is when things are going to get really starting getting bad. It's going to be happening. All right? And then we will continue. This whole section here has to do with the very first question. When is the destruction of Jerusalem going to happen? What are the signs? All right, let's continue on. I'm going to have somebody else read for me. Verse 9 and 10 for me, please.
Then they will deliver you up to tribulation and kill you. You will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. And then many will be offended, will betray one another, and will hate one another. Then many false.
All right, we'll stop right there. What's going to happen to the Christians? What is this? They're fixed to get persecuted. What happened? What did we find out? How? Anyone want to describe some of the persecutions they went through? We know that they put people on stakes and burn them and used them as lampposts to light their walkways with them, dipped them in oil or tar and lit them on fire. We know that they threw them in the lions' dens. They threw them in for entertainment, to watch them get torn to pieces, even with their children, just because they would not relent and say that there wasn't such thing as a Christ, there wasn't such thing as God. But lots of people.
Even when they didn't kill them, they persecuted them and they made life miserable.
How did they do that? You remember? It's kind of hard to go to the grocery store and they won't let you buy groceries. Or you need clothing and they won't let you buy clothes. Or you need to travel and they won't let you stay in a place. You have to sleep on the side of the road just because you're a Christian. They persecuted them in lots of different ways. Even the Jews persecuted the Christians before this time. Once you started saying that I believe who Christ was, they already started cutting you off, didn't they? Some of that goes on today. When someone in a family at times becomes a Christian, the rest of their family turns on them, don't they? And that is a persecution. I'm hoping none of us have had to face that, but I know some have. It's a very, very difficult thing to go through when your own children, or even sometimes your own spouse, turns against you. That's a persecution. And that's very tough. This is what's going to happen. You're going to start seeing more and more and more persecution. That's the sign. Once you see persecution increase. Plus the Roman government, not just the Jewish leaders, but the Roman government themselves started persecuting.
I'll say that, this whole, you said before, this section is so misunderstood by many people, and, I've even heard Christians say that, we start having a war,
This shows the end of time.
it must be coming time, or, and this chapter clearly state the signs that he talks about, just like in Isaiah's time, whenever he's talking about the destruction of Babylon, and just like with Ezekiel, whenever he's talking about destruction there, the same things happened. It was the destruction of the nation,
Right.
not the end of time coming. It was the destruction of the nation.
This
So-
is where most of the world gets confused in these statements, and you
They're
still
basically for
hear it today.
Right, and he clearly said, you know, these signs are gonna be showing that this country, this nation is about to be destroyed. And he told them, these are some things that are gonna happen, you know, it's gonna be getting closer, so that you need to start, you know, looking and start watching,
Right.
because he told them, as we're gonna read in a little bit, the things are gonna be happening, if you're out in the pasture, if you're out, you know, it's gonna be
We're
bad.
just to cover that in a minute, you know, and we're going to talk about why that was so important for them to understand of what was going to happen to them.
You can imagine during the WW2, how the world felt. They were probably applying this to that time period too. because
Think about today. Think about the Ukraine.
so identical.
What's happening to them? Your whole city is being destroyed around you. What are you going to be thinking? This is the end of times. This is the end of my life. This is the end of everything we know. So is God coming? Is he going to appear again and take vengeance on those that are so evil to everyone else? And are we going to get to go and be with God from now on? Which
One
is,
thing I keep thinking is, hear all this talk, and it may be very simple, but Jesus also says, "An hour when you least expect it is when I'm coming."
that is next week's lesson. Because he says over and over and over, he's going to come as a what?
Thief in the night.
You won't know. There is no signs when he's coming back. And that's something that people just don't understand. When he is going to come and take the world and destroy the world and take those, there is no sign. He's going to appear with a great, and it says a great trumpet will sound, and he will be there, and it will happen. Nothing before that will do. Right?
Well, you know, it's like, we do have a lot of things going on today. For example, some of the movements now that are so strong are directly opposed to what we believe.
Sure.
And we're persecuted sometimes because they think, look, you're supposed to love everybody and that sort of thing. But that's not what he's talking about here. He's not talking about us right here in this scripture. He's talking about Britain.
Exactly. And that's where people don't.
But we still have those things today.
Sure.
That doesn't mean that's what he's talking about.
Yeah, and every generation, I think, goes through this. They see a war or they see things happening, and he's going to talk about earthquakes here in a little bit. He's going to talk about some other things that are going on. We have hurricanes, and of course, once you start having, it's always usually the same time of the year when all the hurricanes start hitting, all the tornadoes hit here in April and May is when we get most of those tornadoes through this area here. And they can happen at any time, but we get them. What do they start saying? Oh, this is a sign of God coming back. Well, it's been happening for how many generations? We're not going to know those things. And they get those confused with these statements here.
The fact that Christ goes on, like you say, next week's lesson tells us that there be no signs. Should have been a clue, but that's not what this was talking about.
It should be. It should be, but people read into what they want it to be, right? All right.
I
Someone,
think what your point is that many things that people interpret as being signs of the impending end of the world are actually signs of the impending destruction of the temple in Jerusalem.
Exactly.
Right? That's it. What we're talking about in a nutshell, I think.
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. All right, someone read verses 11 through 13, please. There's another sign that's going to be coming.
Then many false prophets will rise up and deceive many. Because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold. But he who endures to the end shall be saved.
Boy, that sounds like today, doesn't it?
Sounds a lot like today. And again, every single generation can plug themselves into these verses. I don't care what generation it was, from that time forward, when Christ said them, that when the words came out of his mouth, every single generation wants to apply that to themselves. Okay? But we've already said, who's going to get to see this happen? That generation will get to see that, what's going on here. Okay? So, let's look at the last one, the other sign. Verse 14, someone.
And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come.
How did it reach all the world? What caused that? The persecution happened.
In Colossians, which was written before the destruction of Jerusalem, that
Right.
the whole world had been preached, the gospel had been preached to the whole world. We're told in Romans 1 or 8 or something.
I don't know where that's
That
at.
it was,
In Romans
the
1.
gospel had been preached to the whole, and all those things were done before the destruction of Jerusalem. So
Right.
again, the time frame, the evidence is so strong that this is talking about the destruction of Jerusalem.
Right. And it was because of the persecution that caused people to flee and leave before Jerusalem even fell. Now, when Jerusalem fell, it even got more spread out. We know that because they ran. They had to run. All the gospel had been preaching to the kingdom of God, had been preaching to everyone of those days. Okay?
So, I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
I'm myself up with proof. So Romans chapter 10, verse 18, it says, "Had they not heard, yes, verily their sound went out to all the earth, and their words into the end of the world." So it had been taught, and also in Colossians chapter 1, it says basically the same thing. And those were written before
Sure.
Jerusalem.
Way before the fall of Jerusalem. Yep. Not maybe way before, but written before the fall of Jerusalem. Could be as much as 30, 35 years before. Depending on what time period. All right. Now, that was the first question. The first question was, when will the temple be torn down? All the signs has to be fulfilled, right? So these signs are going to be fulfilled. What is the sign of your coming to tear down the temple? Now, this is where people get confused with this. It's the same type of wording that they use for the end of the world, when God's going to come back and destroy the world. But he's talking about God is coming with judgment on Jerusalem for the temple. And that's what he's talking about. You're coming. You're going to come and destroy this town, this place, Jerusalem. All right? What are we're going to be looking at, it's going to be a time of great tribulation. There's a lot of the headings in your Bibles. And again, this is where a lot of the world thinks is going on now. Our generation, the next generation will say the same thing about their times. All right? Someone start, if they would, in verse 15 for me.
Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, whoever reads, let him understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let him who is on the housetop not go down to take anything out of his house. And let him who is in the field not go back to get his clothes. But woe to those who are pregnant, and to those who are nursing babies in those days. And pray that your flight may not be in winter, or on the Sabbath. For then there will be great tribulation, such as not been since the beginning of the world until this time, no, nor ever shall be. And unless those days were shortened, no flesh would be saved, but for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened.
All right? Some things is going to have to happen, and you better be watching and better be... Well, what is the abomination of desolation? It's talked about in Daniel, someone. Y'all remember that?
Where they put something in the temple, I forgot.
Well, what was it?
The hog.
Abomination.
Who was that? What was the guy's name? Antiochus Epiphanes the fourth actually took a hog or a pig and altered and sacrificed it on the altar, which was an unclean animal to the Jews. That was what it was called, talking here. And Christ said the same similar thing is going to happen, and it did in 70 A.D. when Titus, was that his name? The Roman general? Yeah, Titus, the Roman general, came in and destroyed the temple. They did exactly the same thing. He went and set up an idol on where the temple or where the altar was. He did that just to shame any of the Jewish people that was there. All right, it talks about they had to. You better flee to the mountains and get away from here. If you're on the rooftop, you better stop what you're doing and run. Why was it so bad if it was going to be done in the winter or on the Sabbath?
The gates would be closed if it was on the Sabbath.
Right?
So you wouldn't be able to get back in if you were out.
Which they told you better not go back in because you're not going to get out more than likely.
Right.
But also in the wintertime, if you're out in the fields or if you're on the rooftop or if you're doing work, you won't have time to go gather any winter gear. Anybody if you're just chunked out of your house during the wintertime, it's hard to survive, isn't it? It's going to be you won't have any food with you, you won't have any shelter with you, you won't have any clothing with you to keep warm. It's going to be very, very difficult if it's done in the winter. And if it's done on the Sabbath, there was other things that weren't allowed to be done on the Sabbath. So
You want
you're not supposed to travel, which would go against everything you've ever been taught, right? Plus, you've already prepared the food for that day, because you're not allowed to prepare food. You can't go back and prepare food to take. Anybody go on a trip without taking something with them? None of us do. If you're like my wife, she takes half the house with her. I have so many suitcases, and Bobby knows that. When she comes, just stay with Bobby from time. She'll have 4 or 5 suitcases. She's out for 2 days. I said, Tanya, where are you going in 2 days? But she wants all of her stuff, so we take her stuff. Ladies, y'all do that quite often. I have found out traveling with the guys, they're almost just as bad. Teenager boys, I'm going to tell you, I've had teenage boys bring more clothes in suitcases than some of the girls do. So it's not just the ladies themselves that do that.
Well, you talked about Ukraine being in this desert. You should imagine what it was like for those people this past winter.
And they said that thousands and thousands died from exposure to the winter, to the cold weather. It's very difficult. That's why, and even Christ doesn't know exactly what day it's going to happen. He may know because it's something that does happen and he predicts it. But it could be, it's up to the generals when they plan all this stuff, when they come in. If you're pregnant, carrying a child, especially toward the end of your 9 months that you're carrying a child, how easy is it to travel? And they didn't get in a nice plush car with air conditioning and heating and got to ride off. How did they have to travel? By foot. Ladies, I know that you that have had children, it's very difficult to walk long distances at the end of your pregnancy. Very difficult. Or if you have a nursing child. If you have a child, when you go someplace, it was like us taking the whole the nursery with us. You carried your crib, you carried your playpen, you carried all your diapers, all your wipes, everything you had to have, all your bottles made up. Back then, it's very difficult to change a child into what they're needing because they're going to mess their diapers up. If you're trying to run from somebody, you don't have time to stop and change those children. You're running for your life. And that's why he says, just hope it's not, for the ladies, you're not pregnant or have a nursing child. Because that makes your travel twice as difficult as it is. Okay?
But is he telling them here that you've got to basically use a little more modern vernacular, get out of Dodge because they're going to kill you?
Exactly. And Josephus told us, what did they do? Through Josephus' writings, what did they do when they came into Jerusalem to destroy the temple? Anybody they caught in town, they slaughtered them, didn't they? And they said the temples, the priests and stuff were stacked up to the door frames. They just killed them and just bodies everywhere. And he's going to talk about in a little bit about the eagles coming to feast on the bodies that were there. You just didn't drag all the people out. They just let the birds and buzzards eat them. So.
Speaking of that, I have a question about related to the temple was destroyed in AD 70.
Right.
There are those, and I think it's the premillennialists who say this, that there's going to be a third temple erected, I believe, in Jerusalem.
I don't know where they get that either.
Have you heard them say that?
I've heard, not a lot. I've never talked to anyone. I've heard some of their, sayings and writings and stuff about it, but I've never heard anybody actually.
But I have heard them say that the temple will be rebuilt.
Right. Well, also the world tells you who is the chosen people of the world still today.
Jews.
Are they?
No.
They turned their back on Christ. They turned their back on God. And they'd already been destroyed once, and then they got destroyed twice. And now we're going to talk also about what happens to, it ends, we talked about a period of time, it ends the Jews' period of time of being who they were. Because once they destroyed the temple, what did you destroy? What did they destroy? Why the birth record so important? All right. And who did that make the most importance? The priest, the tribe of Levi. Because no longer you had anyone that could actually, they couldn't prove that they were from the Levite tribe, that they could actually act as priest and do these sacrifices. Plus, they weren't allowed to sacrifice anymore. They stopped all the sacrifices. And that was very important to the Jews. Here's the end of your time period on earth that you were doing the things that you were doing. How much has changed from that time period to the modern day Jews?
Well, they claim that Israel being reestablished as a nation in 1948 is a fulfillment of prophecy. thing is, the Israel of today is not the Israel that's mentioned in the Old Testament. Because as you just said, that Israel was wiped from the face of the earth.
Right.
I mean, they disobeyed him over and over and over. And the thing that I would like to ask the premillennialists or whoever it is preaching this is, if the Jews are still God's chosen people, why are his chosen people, by and large, people who reject Christ? Because they do. I mean, some Jews have been converted, I presume, or at least converted to a pseudo form of Christianity. But the average Jew does not accept Christ. And he said he was the way, the truth, and the life, never lived.
Right. And they usually don't have an answer for you. They will sidestep, trying to lead you in a different direction because they don't have an answer. There is no answer for that. Well, there is one answer. It's not true.
The one thing I know is their television commercials, where they're always trying to get you to give money to these Holocaust survivors in Israel, and you see these poor, miserable old women who look like they're starving, and I'm thinking, number one, why do you want to just help the Jews and not other people?
Right.
And number two, why isn't Israel helping these people? It's their citizens.
Right. They're living there in that country.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And it's a modern day world. It's a modern day city.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
I've been there. I've been to Jerusalem. Israel's a modern country, and I don't understand how the Israeli government doesn't help their own.
Well, we gave them so many million for that area when that was.
I said at one time we were giving them $3 billion a year.
And probably still are. I found out the other day we're still giving China money too. That just blew my mind. Millions and millions of dollars a day.
But to get back to the subject that we're talking about here, when somebody starts talking to us about, oh, the world's fixing to end because of all this, Matthew chapter 24, it's important to get across to them. Now, when he's talking about the signs of the impending destruction of the temple in Jerusalem in AD 70, he's not talking about signs of the end of the world.
Nope, he is not. And again, Jesus is telling them, these are the signs you better be watching for. It's coming in your lifetime. And it came within 15, 20, 30 years of when he said this. It came, yeah, is that right? For 40 years. It came within that time.
Well, we know one thing, none of those apostles are still alive today.
No, not at all. All right, let's continue. And he said, remember in verse 22, unless those days are shortened or were shortened, no flesh would be saved. But for the elect, which are the Christians, for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened. God's going to take care of those that do what they're supposed to do. That's what he's saying. Okay? Let's continue on. Someone read, this is the second question that's coming about. We already talked about that. And the Christian's response to that came through verses 16 through 22. How are they supposed to respond to that? And it's getting ready. Leave the rooftop. Leave the city. Hopefully you are doing everything and you read the signs and saw the signs so you can be prepared for that. And that's what he said in this section here. Let's continue on, starting in verse 23 for me. Someone read from 23 down through 28, please.
Then if anyone says to you, look, here is the Christ, or there, do not believe it. The false Christ and false prophets will rise and show great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. See how it goes beforehand. Therefore, if they say to you, look, he is in the desert, do not go out. Or look, he is in the inner rooms, do not believe it. For as the lightning comes from the east and flashes to the west, so also will be the coming of the Son of Man. For wherever the carcass is, there the eagles will be gathered together.
All right. Because they're going to destroy Jerusalem. And it's going to be total desolation. And always after a war or a battle, there's bodies laying everywhere. Even modern day war. You've seen pictures of it. We saw it in World War II. We saw it in Korea. We saw it in Vietnam. We saw it in Afghanistan. Those bodies laying everywhere. You go in and wipe a city out, you're going to kill a lot of people. Women, children, makes no difference. Men, army people. And during a heat of battle, you can't do anything about those bodies, can you? They're just left. There's so many pictures of places that shows you of birds eating all the people.
There's so many details to all of this. It sure makes you believe in the old adage, history repeats itself.
Over and over
It's
and
been
over.
done it over and over.
Yep. It does. So when he's talking about the Son of Man in verse 27, it's the coming of the Son of Man, he is talking about the judgment that is going to be on the city of Jerusalem. God is coming. Who is in charge of the earth at this time anyway? Christ is, right? Christ is the one that has all dominion over everything. So he is going to be part of the destruction of Jerusalem. He is going to guide that from heaven, however he does that. And he's telling them some of the things. And then we start using, the next section is the hard part. This is where lots of people get confused. They're using a lot of apocalyptic type language, a lot of figurative type language, a lot of hyperbole. Now, what is hyperbole?
Exaggeration.
Exaggerations are saying one thing to meaning something else. Yesterday, if someone called me yesterday during it was raining, and they asked me, well, how's it doing at your house? And I said, it's raining cats and dogs. Do I really mean it's raining actually cats and dogs coming out of the skies? Do we understand what I'm saying? You know, it feels like it's raining cats and dogs because, I mean, it is coming down. But you understand, when we read through this next section, those people understood what he was saying here. He is not talking about the end of the destruction of the world. He is talking about using this poetic language that a lot of the Bible is written in, and Jesus himself uses it here. So let's read through this section, and we're going to talk about a few things. All right, go ahead. Someone 29 through 31.
Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven, and all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other.
All right, that sure sounds like the end of times, doesn't it? The destruction of the world. Sounds just like it, because a lot of that same type of language is used in Revelations, when John was talking about it there. But again, what did we say in verse 34? That this generation is going to see all these things before they pass away. So he cannot be talking about the end of times when the world's been destroyed, can he? So he's talking about the destruction of Jerusalem here. And some of the phrases, go ahead.
I was just going to say, going back to use that exact same language in Isaiah, talking about the
Destruction
destruction of Babylon.
of Babylon, exactly.
So they knew the Bible, they knew the Old Testament.
That's why they understood what Jesus was saying to them. They understood these terms. We don't, because we don't use these kind of terms today. But he did. All right? Let's look at the darkening. What is it talking? The sun will be darkened. What makes our sun go dark today? An eclipse. All right? There's going to be some eclipse happening. That's going to let you know. Okay? They understood that when you say about the sun darkening. And it usually they associate that with the destruction of a city. It's going to be a bad time for that city. All right, it's going to be an eclipse on that city. All right, it's talked about the falling stars, right? And the stars will fall from the heavens. That means that someone is going to get overthrown to them. They understood that. Their star, their individual that they have as a king or a ruler is going to fall like a star from heaven. They understood that language. The heavens will shake. Anybody been in an earthquake here? I was in one in Alaska a few years ago. And it was just a small one. I felt a rumbling. I was laying flat on the ground watching the moose come down a mountain. I was hoping I was going to get to shoot. And Creston was about 30 or 40 yards from me to the left. And I was laying on the ground trying to keep still, watching this moose as he comes down, this bull moose. And all of a sudden I feel this rumble in my chest. And I mean, it rumbled all the way through me. And birds took off all the trees. And Creston, I turned and looked at him. He looked at me and goes, "What was that?" And I said, "Earthquake." But that was just a small one. I've never been in a large earthquake. But when the heavens shake, when we talk about heaven shake, it's talking about earthquakes. Do they still have earthquakes over there today? A lot of those places, they sure do. Lots of earthquakes. So that was another thing they understood is the earthquake or destruction of the city is going to quake and it's going to fall. The city is going to fall.
Turkey recently was said to, if I remember right, it killed 40,000 people.
Right. Now, if we're out in the country, the earthquake's not such a big deal to us, is it? But if you're in downtown Dallas, and a big earthquake hits Dallas, or in Los Angeles, I had an uncle one time that was in a skyscraper when that big earthquake, the last one hit California, that stopped the World Series games. And not the Golden Gate Bridge, but what's the other bridge? It failed, collapsed, and crushed cars, and all that was on the news. Y'all remember that? Said it scared him to death. I mean, he said the whole building was just waving and shaking. So they understood that type of language. And it says in here, all tribes. Think about the people in those cities now, today, in the Ukraine. When their city starts being bombed, and you can't hardly get out. And we've all seen videos of them going down the road, and a missile hits right in the middle of the road, right in front of them, blows up cars, and puts a big hole in the road. Doesn't it feel like the whole world is falling apart? That all the people that are dying right there, because their whole world is just right there at the time that you're in. And that's what he's talking about here. That all the tribes are gonna understand what's going on. That it will reach all tribes. And then the four winds. They're going to all be gathered together during that time. From all corners, all areas, they're going to come into that city trying to seek refuge when they come under attack. But that's the figurative language that they're using here. And again, the world forgets about all that. All right? And then he goes on to tell them, you got to be prepared. You got to read the signs. Let's look at what he says from 32 down through 35. Someone read that for me, please.
Now learn this parable from the fig tree. When its branch has already become tender and puts forth leaves, you know that summer is near. So you also, when you see all these things, know that it is near at the door. Surely I say to you, this generation will by no means pass away till all these things take place.
Okay.
Heaven and earth.
Oh, I'm not going to go ahead.
Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will by no means pass away.
All right. Their world is going to fall apart, isn't it? When Jerusalem falls, their world is going to fall apart. That's going to be passing away. He's not meaning the whole world is going to pass away. Jerusalem is going to pass away. And it did. They destroyed more than the temple. They destroyed that whole city. It wasn't just the temple itself. It was everything. Now he says, why does he add this little parable? How do we know when summer gets here? Or it's close? Anybody have barn swallows around their house? Building the nest up under their... Got little birds in them right now. We got two under mine's got full of birds. I know the summer is almost here. When your gardens start coming up, you know the summer is almost here. He's telling you, read the signs. Know the signs. You think back when they produced the Farmer's Almanac. I never really was crazy about the Farmer's Almanac, but they've got it. If you go by the Farmer's Almanac, you're going to make a bunch of mistakes too. It's not the gospel. It's not foolproof. But a lot of people go by that, you know. And it was a lot of good information. But like Steve read this morning, what was the temperature back in August? It's not always accurate. You know, the last couple of years, they missed our summer real bad. We're going to have a terrible summer, or we're going to have a terrible winter. The almanac says it's going to be a terrible winter. Did we have a terrible winter this year? We didn't. But it's not always accurate. But he says these signs are going to be accurate. Pay attention, like when that fig tree puts out its leaves, it's going to start putting on fruit. You know, it only does that in summertime. It tells us the changing of the seasons. And that's why he uses that parable. Be prepared.
I'm confused, and I need an explanation on verses 30 and 31. Because it says, the Son of Man will appear in heaven. All the tribes of the earth will mourn. They will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory.
All right.
Now, that sounds like the second coming.
It does, doesn't it? It really does.
And what is it?
What was that's the same type of language used in the,
We use it over and over when he talks about his power, his wrath, when he's bringing his destruction on the nation.
right.
That's that same language.
Yeah, God uses it several times in the Old Testament. Well, he will come as a cloud when he wanted to destroy Jerusalem the first time, or even when he goes in to destroy those nations that he let destroy Jerusalem. He talks about the same type of language, coming in a cloud, coming as and he uses the sun. Who is in charge at this time? Christ has already died by this time, right? He is in heaven, sitting on the right hand of God. So who is going to be coming? Christ himself to destroy Jerusalem.
Well, the cloud would be exactly.
Exactly. Remember, this is all figurative language.
People say that he came in AD 70, that was the second coming.
But
Right.
the cloud was settled on the mountain whenever Moses went out to receive the law. I mean, several, I'm not bad with the state, but several references to God being in the cloud.
Right. It means God's presence. That's what he's talking about. It means God's presence is going to be there because he is allowing this thing to happen. How many times did God allow the Jews' enemies to destroy them? He used them, right?
Several.
And he's using the same thing again. God is using the enemies of the Jews to destroy the temple again. All right? It's a repeat of history here. So don't get confused on this part being Christ actually coming like the second. It sounds a lot like the second coming, or when he's going to destroy the world. Next. Because that's the next thing we're going to talk about next Sunday. Now, he will talk about the destruction of the end of times at the end of the world. And that's what we're going to cover next week. And we're going to find out there's no signs, guys. Totally opposite of what the world teaches today, isn't it? Okay? Keep that in mind. Read through this next week. This whole section here, nothing about Jerusalem, all about Jerusalem. The next section, they ask him the next questions. And he's going to tell them, what's the difference between Jerusalem's destruction and me coming back to destroy the world? And we're going to pick that up next week. Good time for a good question. Any other comments?
I was just gonna say, as far as climate change is concerned, like Steve was talking about a little bit there this morning. Everybody's known since creation that we have 4 changes a year. Climate change 4 times a year.
And what amazes me, we had an ice age that put all the glaciers and all the ice caps and all that stuff there, and they don't think it's going to melt one day. It's been melting since the day it quit freezing. So it's just,
Well, not only that, climate change supposedly is man going to destroy the earth. No, God is going to.
right. Yes, ma'am.
One more point that I heard someone bring out one time is, and it's true, up until this point, he mentioned days, because it lasted. The siege and then the destruction after that was like, what, 2 months or something?
Something,
like that? Those were days. But then when we talk about the changing point in this chapter, when you go down to verse 36, he says, but that day, because it's not going to last
Right.
days and days and days.
Exactly. Because anytime anything's taken, even how long did it take us when we moved into the Afghanistan to take that area? We did it in one day? Did we take Iwo Jima in one day? It took days to do this. And you look at the old battles, it may have taken a year or more. They set up outside and they bombarded the cities for days and days and days, like she said. But next week we're going to find out. He said there's going to be one day when I come back. It's going to be done. All right? Any other comments? Thank you for the lesson. All right. Appreciate it.